Let's see what Andy Mitten thinks. Andy, good morning to you.
Not really a good morning, is it?
No, well...
Appreciate the sentiment.
So, a couple of things, right? We had John Bruin on the show yesterday morning, and he was talking about the 0-0 and particularly how in Manchester United's, in the fans' memory, in the institutional memory, there is the Real Madrid game from, I think, the year 2000, and then there's a Barcelona game from a couple of years after that where the away leg seems to go really well. It's 0-0, and he was making the point, yeah, but that's Real Madrid and Barcelona, and this is Sevilla, who aren't that Real Madrid and who aren't that Barcelona team. But it turns out they didn't need to be.
If you let Sevilla play, then they're going to play. They've got some exceptionally good, technically good players, and they proved that in the first leg where they struggled to score, and they proved it in the second leg at Old Trafford. They were better in the first half in Spain, the second half, the first half at Old Trafford, and the second half at Old Trafford. And Manchester United were hugely disappointing. Now, I thought it was acceptable after the first leg if there was a master plan of keeping a clean sheet away from home and going at them at Old Trafford and beating them. And that's what the fans expected. That's what, as a Manchester United fan, you come to expect, these great European nights at Old Trafford. But if you look a little bit deeper, actually, United's record against Spanish teams at home is pretty poor. I'm just thinking, since 2013, lost against Real Madrid, lost against Athletic Club Bilbao, drew against Celta Vigo and lost against Sevilla, who went ahead with an absolutely fantastic finish. And there was just a nervousness last night, right from the start, on the pitch, in the stand. United let Sevilla play. And you mentioned Steven Nzonzi, you mentioned Ever Banega. They're both technically good players. Spanish teams are very, very good. Sevilla are very experienced, not just domestically, but in Europe as well. They've won 3 Europa League tournaments. I've watched them play regularly, and they are inconsistent. This is a team that conceded 5 goals against Eibar, that since they played Manchester United at home, have lost 2 matches. They conceded 5 goals at home to Atletico Madrid. And when they came to Old Trafford, I didn't think that they were strong enough, because whatever the faults of this United team are, and it's not a vintage Manchester United team, it is one which gets results. And it is one which I felt has been slowly improving. Okay, second in the league is not top of the league. We all know how good Manchester City are. But this has been the best season since Sir Alex Ferguson stepped down. But it's also a season of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Just as you think things are clicking into place, bang, something bad happens. And now that United have been knocked out of this competition and the League Cup, it only leaves the FA Cup. So United don't win that this season, it's going to be seen as a disappointing season, more disappointing than last year, when at least the club managed to win 2 trophies.
I'm not sure, did you see Steven Nzonzi speaking on television after the game, but he seemed almost despondent with Manchester United after the game, which was very unusual, and he said that he expected Manchester United to press a little bit more. It's a really sad indictment of a football team when a player who's just enjoyed one of their greatest wins over Manchester United actually feeling a little bit sorry for this Manchester United side.
I've spoken to players who've played against Manchester United post-2013, usually in private, and they said to me they can't believe how poor Manchester United are. They can't believe how easy it was to play at Old Trafford. And that's changed a bit under Mourinho. United had only lost 1 game in the last 15 months at Old Trafford. That was against Manchester City. The previous defeat was against Manchester City. Manchester City have a better team than Manchester United at the moment. I don't think anybody denies that. But I don't think Nzonzi could have believed the space that he had and how Manchester United did sit back. And that came from the fans. There was a nervousness from the fans as well. And I don't think they knew too much about Sevilla. I think they expected United to go at them. And when that didn't happen, there was like a hush of, oh no, what's happening here? And that transmitted into the players and maybe vice versa as well. Sevilla have been a hugely successful football club in the last 12 years, but they're working off a budget a quarter of the size of Manchester United. And United have got those huge name players like Paul Pogba, like Alexis Sanchez. And when it came down to it, they disappointed. They didn't do as well as they would expect. They didn't have the impact on the game that you would expect. They're not the game changers that you would expect them to be. And I'm not one for knee-jerk reactions. I saw people last night calling for Mourinho to go. I don't buy into that. I do think he's making improvements. It is much better than under Louis van Gaal. I thought the game against Liverpool at the weekend was hugely entertaining. I thought United played very, very well in the first half. They're comfortable in second place at the moment, but on a day like today, after the team have been knocked out of Europe, having lost at home, it all just feels so, so disappointing.
Let's talk a little bit about Pogba. Why is he not in the starting lineup for the biggest game of the season?
Because he's not playing very well, and because he's been ill, he's had little injuries. He started this season well, then he had quite a significant injury, and because his manager doesn't trust him enough to start him in the starting lineup for the biggest game of the season. And that's not great for him. It's not great for the manager. He was bought to be a star. I still think he's a terrifically talented footballer, but he's having and continues to have his most difficult moment at Manchester United. He doesn't have a major problem with Jose Mourinho, I know that for a fact, and he's not the first player to go through a difficult spell at a football club. I think he's got the talent to come out of that, but I think Mourinho went for a more risk-averse version of a side. I think when he played Marouane Fellaini, as when he plays Scott McTominay, he knows and trusts what they can do, and Pogba is a player that takes risks and he dares, and Alexis Sanchez does it, usually a bit further up the field, and that's why you see Sanchez lose possession so often. But United fans like players who take risks, but I can understand Mourinho's perspective. And Pogba's had a couple of stinking matches where he hasn't played well. Admittedly, at Newcastle, he'd been sick before the game, but he was dreadful against Tottenham at Wembley at the end of January. I think he needs to pick his confidence up and find some run of form, because it's not good enough when you play for Manchester United. Never mind how much he cost. He's a very, very talented player, and I watched him at Juventus, and he was a different player. He was completely dominating the matches, and he's got to start doing that for Manchester United. He certainly has the talent to do it. But that risk-averse selection which Jose took, I mean, he also started Marcus Rashford. Excellent on Saturday, very, very disappointing against Sevilla. Romelu Lukaku, completely isolated in Seville, receiving the ball with no player around him for 30 metres. I don't think even Lionel Messi could work with that type of service. And United had a couple of flashes last night, but no, Sevilla were totally in control. And as the game wore on, there was a feeling of, oh no, when is this goal going to come? And it was a wonderful finish from Ben Yedder to open the scoring.
So the responsibility for the isolation of Lukaku, for Rashford not playing as well, how much of that is down to the players, and how much of it is actually down to that caution that seems to be transmitted by Mourinho, by the team selection, and also just by how he speaks about this team at the moment?
The players like the manager. I think the players who play badly have to take some responsibility for playing badly. Marcus Rashford was full of confidence on Saturday. He got the early goal. United did seem to go off on the front foot against Liverpool, and they were more defensive in the second half, and Liverpool played very well. And there was also a nervousness on Saturday when Liverpool looked like they were going to get an equaliser. But last night, you would expect United to really go at Sevilla. They needed to score. A draw was never going to be good enough, and it just didn't happen. And if that is going to be the tactic, then it was a surprise to the fans. And you saw on Saturday when United got the early goal against Liverpool, everybody was lifted, the players were lifted, the fans were lifted. I mean, that didn't happen last night. Come on, this is Manchester United. They're at home in Europe. You expect them to attack. You don't expect the team to have as much ball as Sevilla had, to have as many chances as Sevilla. I watched the game in Andalusia in the first leg, and I watched the scoreboard behind the goal ticking up with chances created. Sevilla 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Manchester United 2, 3, 4. I didn't expect the same at Old Trafford. It wasn't quite as emphatic. But Sevilla, I've never seen a team create as many chances at Old Trafford since I think Real Madrid beat Manchester United in 2013. And Jose Mourinho, you know he didn't expect to win this competition. And you know that United are not the best team in Europe. And this isn't a vintage Manchester United team, and it's still a team in transition. But I still expected them to be a pretty inconsistent Sevilla team who are fifth in the table in Spain. This isn't Barcelona or Real Madrid, it's Sevilla. They were there to be got at, and United didn't get at them. They didn't wake up until with 10 minutes to play of 190 minutes of football.
You mentioned a team in transition there, Andy, and usually when it comes to a team in transition, you'd like to hope that there's an end point and some light at the end of the tunnel, but it seems that transition is going to be stalled a little bit. Like, you look at somebody like David De Gea, who's arguably their best player at the moment, and he must be incredibly frustrated at the moment, and it's quite feasible that he might leave the club this summer. That surely stalls the transition and kind of puts it on in the other direction entirely.
It says something that De Gea was Player of the Season at United pre-seasons in succession, and he's a contender for Player of the Season this year. He kept United in the leg in Sevilla. He's had some outstanding games. The game against Arsenal away in December was the best I've seen a goalkeeper play, and I'm sure there's a part of him thinking, had I gone to Madrid, I'd now be sat with some European Cups at home. He wouldn't have as much money as he has. And you say about him leaving in the summer, he would have to push for that so strongly because United don't want to sell him. He's not doing the same amount of money at Madrid, even though it's Real Madrid. And Madrid do have other options. They're looking at other options. There's always this nervousness about losing David De Gea. It's been there for 4 or 5 years. And could you blame him for going? Going back to his home city, where his partner lives, where all his friends are, where it's Real Madrid, who do actually know how to win European Cups. And he's been unlucky because this isn't Manchester United's time, and I'd love to see David De Gea become one of the main points of a Manchester United side which returns to greatness. And there are times when I think that this team are getting closer and closer, and there are other times where I think the recruitment policy is completely flawed. The team are buying names. The sum of the parts is a lot less than it should be. There was more unity in that Sevilla team last night, and it's all right buying Alexis Sanchez, who I do think is a very good player, but he hasn't settled in yet, and maybe next season he'll come good. It's all right talking about the number of social media hits and all that. You've got to do it on the pitch. That's where it really matters. Never mind commercial value. Everything follows from what the team are doing on the pitch, and last night they didn't do it on the pitch.
You made the point that there was knee-jerk reaction from some fans for Mourinho to go, and what we've seen in Mourinho's past is that there's a time limit, and we never know when the clock starts ticking. Some places it seems like the clock is ticking from before he gets the job, and some places it seems like it happens, there's a random point along the way. And like with Chelsea, we never knew. I mean, after they won the league, it looked like he was going to be there for a long time. There is always this sense that you're on an internal clock that Mourinho sees that nobody else sees. Does something like last night hasten his departure, or does it actually embolden him a little bit within the club hierarchy to make sure that he gets the players and that he has more control for a while, and that lengthens the period of time that we expect him to be at Old Trafford?
I know he's happy at Old Trafford, and you use the word emboldened. I know he felt emboldened after signing the recent contract, and he's going to have setbacks, and that happens to every football manager. The only talk I saw last night of getting rid of Mourinho was anonymous people on social media. I walked up and down the stand last night at half time. I was around at full time. I was soaking in opinions, and there was a weariness. People were really annoyed, but there was nobody saying, like they did under the last days of Van Gaal, that the manager has got to go. They're frustrated with him. They think he got the tactics wrong. But what's the plan B? You know, get Pep Guardiola in. It's not going to happen. He's clearly a brilliant manager, and getting him would annoy City fans so much, but it's just not going to happen. You're living in dreamland if you think that's going to happen. Mourinho will keep pushing for players. That's what every manager does, and the club will be under more pressure to bring those big name players in. But do the big name players deliver? Angel Di Maria, Radamel Falcao, Paul Pogba has been patchy this season. You know, I hope Manchester United doesn't become a graveyard for great players. And it seems that sometimes these signings are driven by fans who want names because they're watching these great names, or they're playing computer games with these great names, and they think Manchester United should be signing them, and the club can buy into that a little bit with the commercial appeal. But some of Manchester United's greatest teams have had key players. John O'Shea, Darren Fletcher, they're not world superstars, but they were integral to the success of Manchester United, and that's the manager's job to build that. And he does have lesser name players. I thought Ashley Young was fantastic on Saturday against Liverpool, but Young, Valencia, they're well into the 30s now. Every season we keep saying that this team is 2, 3, 4 players short, and it never seems to go beyond that because so many of the signings don't do as well as you'd hope.
Andy, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm sorry for your trouble.
It's not a real problem, is it?
No. Andy Mitten there of United We Stand. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.